What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams with The Distance. I'm here to give you my number one for my top five series for this week. My number five was Stanley Ketchel. My number four is Bob Fitzsimmons. My number three was Carlos Monzon. My number two was Bernard Hopkins. And on the part one of a two-part number one for my top middleweights, part one will be Marvin Hagler, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. See, three names that stand out for Marvin Hagler is Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, and Roberto Duran. Other than these guys are Hall of Famers and one future Hall of Famer. So anyway, Marvin Hagler he won the title I believe in 1979, 1980, around that time, and he had like 12, at least 12 successful defenses. Was nearing Monzon's record. He was nearing Monzon's 13 straight title defense record, and he ended his career in a close matchup against Sugar Ray Leonard. You know he he was he's a very successful champion. He's the first man to hold the WBA, WBC, and IBF middleweight championship simultaneously. Before Hopkins, before the WBO belt was added, to the mix, and that was like in the late '80s. So Hagler, he was one of the first, to hold all three belts simultaneously. I think the IBF came out in '85, and he was rewarded the belt. And I think all the undisputed champions were pretty much just rewarded that belt because at one time it was WBA and WBC. So Hagler held those two belts. He defeated Mint, I believe his name was Minter or Pope, something like that. I believe it was Minter. He defeated him in 1980, and just went on to have a successful reign as the champion and becoming a future Hall of Famer. And at first, he was never given a chance at first to fight for the title. I believe he contended for a few years, when Monzon was the champion, but he never fought for the belt until like 79, 80, around that time. And after Monzon, you had like the championship kind of just flopping around. People were holding it for less than a year, and then Hagler held it for about, let's say, 8 years, 7, 8 years, and just had a very successful reign. He took on Roberto Duran, defeated Duran, even though he did have some problems with Duran. He defeated John the Beast Mugabe, who I mentioned last week, in a war. That matchup was just a complete war. I actually read that Hagler urinated blood after the matchup because the punishment he took. But it took a lot of heart to withstand the shots that he took and go on and win that matchup. And then there was the matchup that stands out to me was the war. Tommy Hearns versus Marvelous Marvin Hagler. That matchup, Hagler was standing there, taking Hearns' best shots. He had a cut, and the blood was flowing, and it's just one of those classic matchups that you just have to watch. Because every boxing fan has to see that matchup. Every boxing fan has to know about that matchup and the magnitude of that matchup, because it was at the time, from what I know, it was one of the biggest matchups, that could have been made. Because Sugar Ray Leonard, was, I believe he retired at that time. I believe he retired, and that was just the best fight to make. Hearns just got knocked out by Leonard like a year or two earlier, and now Hearns, who was like the former welterweight champion, is up to middleweight now. He knocked out Roberto Duran, who Hagler had trouble against, and both of them just had a war. There was so much going on, so much hype, so much back and forth talk between both fighters, and Hagler and Hearns went at it for 3 rounds. It's one of those classics. It's a classic matchup because it's short but sweet. Hearns was getting the best of Hagler. Hagler never went down. He kept fighting, and punches were thrown from every direction, every corner. There was no. It seemed like all the basics and stuff was thrown out the window. They just fought. They fought for 3 rounds, and Hearns ultimately went down. And after that, Hagler continued to defend his crown until his loss to Sugar Ray Leonard. And the matchup against Sugar Ray Leonard, I thought he was winning when he was at Southpaw, but he didn't stick to being at Southpaw and he lost the matchup. A lot of people, a lot of observers say that. But it was a very close matchup, very tight matchup, and Hagler in the blues, and he never fought again. But Hagler, I believe, is perhaps one of the best middleweights of all time, because he fought an era full of very good opponents. He had some quality middleweights that he took on, that he faced, and and three of these men are future Hall of Famers. And what's funny is we talk about Floyd fighting smaller men. Hagler took on smaller men as well. Duran, who's a lightweight champion, Hearns and Leonard, who were welterweight champions. But they moved up to his weight and they fought him. But anyway, that's my number one, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. So I will be back with number 2 in a minute. So thanks for watching. This was Distance. Peace.